Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Masse, New Democratic candidate for Windsor West, and I have been the Member of Parliament for Windsor West since 2002. I want to welcome you here to Windsor and Windsor-Tecumseh. I want to say thanks very much for the leader and the team to be here today. We're going to talk about some cell phones and charges, but I also want to let you know, behind me is the Charlie Brooks Memorial Fountain, and also behind me is the United States, and you might actually be getting roaming charges right now. Ironically, many of my constituents still get roaming charges even though they can't go to the United States. It's one of the rip-offs that's been taking place for consumers over these last number of years. And since 2002, being a member of Parliament working on industry file, I've seen one thing that's consistent. Liberals and Conservatives and the CRTC have sided against consumers, and they've gone with the big telcos. That's resulted in Canada having some of the highest charges for data and for usage, and some of the worst connections taking place. Rural and urban Canada shouldn't be divided. Long before the pandemic, New Democrats declared that cell phone and the access to the internet was essential. We've seen during this pandemic, though, it's also about social justice and a pocket issue that's critical. As Canadians went online to study, as businesses moved behind their own homes and into their basements and into their rooms and offices to keep the economy going, they had extra charges and extra expenses, and our digital divide was exposed quite significantly. So today, we are here again to continue the campaign that we've had. New Democrats have been the forefront at reducing data charges, at the forefront at net neutrality, at the forefront of a digital strategy for all. So I'm pleased to introduce my leader, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate all the work, Brian, that you're doing and all the work that our team is doing to stand up for people. This is something that we do. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Three Fires Confederacy, and that includes the nations of the Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi. What Brian just laid out is exactly what we're here to talk about. We know that people have been struggling in this pandemic. Prices of goods are going up. People are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. Cost of housing is getting out of reach, more out of reach than ever before for young families. And on top of all that, our cell phone fees continue to be among the most expensive in the world. And this is something that Justin Trudeau promised he would do something about. He promised he would make things better. We've behind me a bill to Justin Trudeau because he promised 2 years ago that he would lower the price of cell phone fees per family by about $1,000. Well, 2 years later, that hasn't happened. He hasn't done anything to lower the cost of cell phone fees. So he owes cell phone and internet. So he owes Canadians $2,000 for that broken promise. And really what this is about is Justin Trudeau, as well as Conservatives before, allowing the big telecommunication companies to effectively rip off Canadians. And we are paying high rates for our cell phone, high rates for our internet. If we go over, one of the most frustrating things, either your internet slows down or you've got to pay a huge fee to get it back up. That is frustrating, that is wrong, and we can fix it. We can stand up to the big telco companies and say they should stop charging these high rates. This is something fully within the federal government to do. We can cap the fees, we can save people money. And in this difficult time, when people have needed their internet access more than ever to access for work, for school, for services, we know that this is a necessity, people need it, and it should be affordable. So we're going to take on Justin Trudeau, and we're going to take on the big telco and say, you've got to stop gouging people, and the rates have got to be more affordable. We're going to bring down those rates. We can make it happen. In this election, you've got a choice between Justin Trudeau, who lets the telco companies take advantage of you, or New Democrats who are going to fight to make sure your rates are lower, that you actually save money, and that we can lower the cost for you and your families. Dans cette élection, on a un choix entre Justin Trudeau, qui a fait des promis de réduire le coût des frais d'Internet et cellulaire, mais il a brisé ses promesses. Il a dit qu'il va réduire le coût de $1,000 par famille par année. Après 2 années de cette promesse, encore les frais sont très hauts. Et c'est exactement ce que les libéraux et les conservateurs ont fait. Ils ont laissé les grandes compagnies de télécommunications d'effectivement exploiter les gens. On n'est pas d'accord. On pense qu'on peut faire mieux. Et avec les néo-démocrates, vous avez un choix avec une néo-démocrate qui va se battre pour vous, qui va réduire le coût de vos frais cellulaires et Internet. C'est exactement ce qu'on va faire et on a le pouvoir, on a la capacité de le faire. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm ready for any questions you might have. Before, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.
First question, we have Tom Perry with CBC News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thank you for taking our questions. I'd like you to define affordable, because I think an affordable rate is probably different for a family living on $50,000 versus $100,000 versus $200,000. So what to you is an affordable rate for mobile phone charges?
We've looked at the OECD countries around the world and looked at what their average rates are. Ours are far above them. So we want to put a cap in place of what the average cell phone price would be, or the average cell phone and internet services would be for the other OECD countries. Canada's right now is far above other similar countries. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the plans for internet are truly unlimited and not this fake unlimited where once you reach a certain point, your internet slows down. So we want to mandate truly unlimited data plans, as well as bring down, have a cap that is capped at the average price of other OECD countries.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Donc, deux mesures pour définir c'est quoi abordable. Si on fait une comparaison avec les autres pays qui sont similaires avec Canada, notre frais de services cellulaires et d'Internet, c'est beaucoup plus haut. Donc, on veut mettre une limite que les taux doivent être les mêmes des moyens des taux pour les autres pays qui sont similaires du Canada. Deuxièmement, pour accès au Internet, on veut que ça soit pas limité. Et maintenant, ce qui se passe, c'est on dit que c'est pas limité, mais quand vous utilisez un montant de Internet, donc ils vont réduire la vitesse. Ce n'est pas vraiment pas limité, donc on veut avoir on veut s'assurer ou forcer les compagnies d'avoir un plan vraiment pas limité.
And yesterday you were talking about forcing a Crown corporation to divest from a private firm, Rivera. Today you're talking about forcing the CRTC to force private companies to lower their rates. How are you going to do that?
Well, we have examples of other countries that have done this. The United States actually put in a price cap. Australia also put in a price cap. So we've got precedent here. It's been done before. Other countries have put in price caps when it comes to the cost of cellular services, when it comes to the cost of internet. So it can be done. Other countries have done it. We can do it. What it really takes is having the courage to do so. And what we've seen from Justin Trudeau and from the Conservatives is they are not willing to take on these powerful interests. They're not willing to take on the big telecom companies, and they're not willing to take profit out of long-term care. We are different. We believe that this is possible. We want to stand up for people effectively. That's their goal. Our goal is to make sure people are able to afford their lives, they can afford their internet and cellular services. We know it's important, and we are not going to take excuses. We're looking for excuses. We're looking for solutions in getting this done.
Next question, Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. The Public Health Agency of Canada hasn't held a single briefing during the pandemic the Public Health Agency of Canada has not held a single briefing during the election because they're in caretaker mode. Do you think that this should change?
I mean, if we needed another reminder why this was a bad decision of Justin Trudeau to call the election, here's another example. We're still dealing with this pandemic, still dealing with the crisis, and we're not able to get briefings of that nature because we're in a caretaker mode. We've said for a long time, in fact, Justin Trudeau agreed with us that we shouldn't have an election. He voted against having an election and then turned around and walked away from that commitment. We're in the election now. We're going to do our best to make sure everyone's safe. But these are some serious concerns, and we want to make sure we are aware of the risks and are doing everything we can to mitigate them. I want to encourage people, participate in this election, vote in this election, but do so in a way that you are comfortable with and safe with. There's mail-in ballots. You can vote in person or in advance, but certainly be involved.
And as a follow-up, we are obviously in a border town where people go back and forth quite frequently. A lot of businesses on both sides of the border depend on it. But cases are rising in the U.S. and here in Canada. The Americans have chosen to keep their border closed, meaning Canadians can't go over by land as easily, but our border is open. Do you think that Canada should reconsider their position on the border?
I really want to take a moment to reflect on this because I grew up in Windsor. This is a town that I grew up in, and I know how important it is for people to be able to cross back and forth. Growing up, I knew so many people that either lived in Canada and worked in the States, or had family in the States, or lived and worked kind of across the border. So it's been really difficult for people here in Windsor. We've heard stories of families that have been disconnected for so long, it's been really difficult. It's been really hard. And so that's got to be something we keep in mind. One of the biggest problems that people have had in this pandemic is the lack of clarity, not knowing when things will open up again, not knowing when they can see their families or be able to get back to that life that they were used to, where you could travel back and forth. And it was so important for a town like Windsor. So that's all very important. We got to keep that in mind. We also have to obviously keep in mind keeping people protected and safe. And I think we've got to monitor the situation very closely and make sure we're making a decision that protects people, keeps people safe, but recognizing how important it is for people to be able to move back and forth.
Prochaine question, Jean-Sébastien Cloutier de Radio-Canada.
Monsieur Singh, Yves-François Blanchet du Bloc québécois, hier, s'est finalement prononcé pour le projet du troisième lien entre Québec et sa rive sud. Quelle est votre réaction sur cette prise de position de M. Blanchet?
On est contre ce projet parce que ce n'est pas un projet qui amène nos buts de réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre, d'investir dans l'infrastructure qui nous aide à faire face à la crise climatique. Donc, ce n'est pas un projet qu'on appuie. Pour nous, on va être des alliés et travailler ensemble avec les provinces et territoires pour les aider, pour investir dans les projets. Mais on veut encourager les projets qui réduisent nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre et créer des emplois locaux.
Par ailleurs, plus les jours avancent, plus les cas de COVID augmentent au Québec, ici, un peu partout. Avez-vous peur d'une abstention importante des votes le jour de l'élection? Comment vous voyez ça? Parce que vous voulez, vous, le vote des jeunes, entre autres. Ça vous fait peur?
J'ai des inquiets parce que je veux s'assurer qu'on a une bonne participation des gens dans notre démocratie. C'est essentiel. Et je sais qu'à cause des cas de COVID-19, ça va potentiellement avoir un impact négatif sur la participation. C'est une autre raison pour laquelle on a dit qu'on n'aurait dû pas avoir une élection dans une pandémie. On a vu en Terre-Neuve et Labrador, l'impact de cette élection a beaucoup réduit la participation et ils ont dû ralentir ou avancer la date de l'élection à quelques fois. Donc, c'est une inquiétude, mais je sais qu'on a les outils en place. On a une Élection Canada, un organisme qui travaille fort pour s'assurer que les élections sont sécuritaires et les gens peuvent participer. Je veux encourager d'utiliser tous les outils possibles. Vous pouvez enlever votre vote, vous pouvez voter en personne, vous pouvez voter en avance. J'encourage les gens de faire un plan de voter qui est sécuritaire en utilisant les mesures qui existent.
Next question, David Akin from Global News.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Yesterday, I asked you about, what do you say to the Liberals who are trying to scare those NDP voters? Today, I want to see if we can get you to talk about Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives. There are a whole lot of ridings in the country where the Liberals aren't a factor. It's a blue-orange switch. Tracy's, of course, is one of those right here in the Windsor area. Can you tell us what you're thinking about Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives right now?
Well, I'd say the message kind of fits for both. We can't afford another 4 years of Justin Trudeau, who lets the super rich get away with a free ride, while New Democrats are committed to making sure they pay their fair share and invest in people. That applies to Aaron O'Toole just as well. He voted against our measure to tax the ultra-rich, to tax companies like Amazon that make record profits in a pandemic but pay virtually no tax here. I can't imagine why anyone would vote against that. And so if people are worried about who pays the price of this pandemic, which I think are all Canadians, the choice is clear. Both Justin Trudeau and Aaron O'Toole don't think that billionaires should pay their fair share. New Democrats do believe they should pay their fair share, and with that fair share, we can invest in people and the help that they need.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Je pense que la même réponse fonctionne pour Aaron O'Toole qui fonctionne pour Justin Trudeau. Beaucoup de monde, beaucoup de gens ont des inquiétudes de qui va payer le prix ou la facture pour la relance et pour la pandémie. Avec Justin Trudeau et Aaron O'Toole, ils ont voté contre notre motion pour faire payer le juste part des millionnaires. Donc, pour nous, le choix est clair. On veut s'assurer que les autorités payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens. Et si c'est une question pour vous, nous, les néo-démocrates, c'est votre réponse.
I'd like to press you a little more on that.
Sure.
Yesterday, the Conservatives said they would put employees first. when companies go bankrupt for pensions. That's the work Scott Duval did. He's trying to get that on the Sears thing. The day before that, they said they put a workers' representative on the board of directors. This is the Conservatives over there. For those two measures, would the New Democrats support those if those two measures ever became before Parliament?
Those are certainly New Democrat measures, but let's be clear. That's what Erin O'Toole is saying. Let's look at what he's done. In Parliament, we've got, just a couple months ago, we've got evidence of what he's done. He teamed up with Justin Trudeau to vote against removing for-profit care from long-term care. Effectively, both Justin Trudeau and Erin O'Toole voted for private care when it comes to long-term care. We're against that. Both Erin O'Toole and Justin Trudeau voted not to tax the ultra-rich. We have a different position. We believe in making sure they pay their fair share. We also put forward an idea around pharmacare. So these are not ideas of Erin O'Toole just announcing things. This is where he votes. This is what he stands for. When we said, let's expand our healthcare to include pharmacare, which is what something that Canadians broadly support, he teamed up with Justin Trudeau to vote against pharmacare, making it clear in each of those instances he would rather protect the ultra-wealthy than workers. So he might say what he wants right now in a campaign, but what did he do when he had a chance to vote? He voted for the interests of the super rich against workers.
Next question, John Chidley-Hill from Canadian Press.
Good morning, Mr. Singh.
Hey there.
Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan is very concerning. Do you think anyone should rule out speaking to the Taliban, talking to the Taliban to try to negotiate the removal of foreign nationals, including Canadians?
We want to do everything possible to support our allies. And I've heard from lots of veterans who've been sharing stories in the media, and I'm sure you've all seen those stories. There are allies in Afghanistan that put their lives at risk and their families' lives at risk to support our Canadian forces. We promised to have their backs, and now it looks like Canada has failed. And that is something we can't allow to happen. So we've got to do everything possible to secure the evacuation of our allies, of those folks that supported us on the ground. When it comes to our relationship with Taliban, I am very firm on this is a terrorist organization that we should not be dealing with. We should not be recognizing, but we need to do everything we can to secure the release of our allies.
En français, s'il vous plaît?
I've never heard the, that's good though, because it's Canadian Press. Well done, well done. On a tous entendu les histoires des anciens combattants qui ont partagé leur histoire de comment les alliés en Afghanistan ont aidé nos forces canadiennes et on a promis de les aider dans les temps difficiles. Et maintenant, c'est un temps difficile et on doit les aider. On doit aider les gens qui veulent évacuer, particulièrement les gens qui ont mis leur vie et la vie de leur famille en péril. On doit les aider. Mais par rapport à notre relation avec les talibans, j'ai dit en avant que c'est un organisme terroriste et on ne doit pas avoir de relations ou reconnaître un tel organisme.
You're here today to speak about having more affordable cell phone services. Obviously, cell phone service and internet access is a pressing concern in northern and Indigenous communities. It's also logistically difficult. I wonder how you would balance having it be affordable, but also reaching those communities that do need access in a world that increasingly needs internet for education and work purposes.
A really important question, and something that we're also really committed to. We need to make sure that everyone in our country has access to affordable and high-speed internet. And that's particularly important for Indigenous communities, rural and remote communities. When we're driving, I drive on the 401 a lot I used to, especially when I was going to school in Western, between Windsor and London. And even on the 401, you'll have moments where your internet disconnects. And if you're in different edges of cities, your internet might not be there. But we know rural communities have literally very little, and many are still on dial-up, very little access to high-speed internet. And remote communities and Indigenous communities have almost none. This is a massive problem because, as you mentioned, for people now, this is not a luxury. This is about work. This is about education. This is about accessing services. So we need to take it seriously. We're committed to using our public resources to look at this as a public investment in infrastructure to support communities that have been left behind. And I think we need to look at it the same way we look at building roads and bridges. We need to look at building the infrastructure to connect people with high-speed internet the same way.
On passera aux questions sur Zoom. We'll go to questions on Zoom. First question, we have Menaka Raymond-Wilms from Globe and Mail.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Thank you for taking our questions. I also want to ask you about the situation in Afghanistan and in Kabul. As things get increasingly dire there, a video has emerged of people saying they have Canadian documents standing in a canal trying to get the attention of soldiers and the soldiers ignoring them. I've also spoken with someone who says they have a Canadian visa who just can't get to the Kabul airport, even though they try every day. So what is your response to how the Canadian government has handled this situation? And what does Canada need to do at this point to get people to safety?
Sadly, and you know, I don't like to. I like to do this unless it's merited. Sadly, what's coming forward, what's emerging is that many of our forces, our veterans who served in Afghanistan in the past, are saying that they were warning Canada of this potential likelihood, and were saying that there needed to be a plan in place to evacuate our allies, that there needed to be a plan in place to evacuate their families much earlier. And they had been warning Canada of what could happen if that plan was not in place. And it looks like their worst fears are coming true. And those images that you speak of, I think we've all seen some of those images, and they're seared into our minds. We have to do everything we can, and now moving forward, we've got to look at every option possible, working with international allies, and finding out ways for us to evacuate those folks that put their lives at risk for us. We've got to try.
And I'll turn to cell phones now for my next one. You just answered a question about internet and cell service in rural and remote parts of the country and Indigenous communities, and how difficult having affordable service will be for those areas. So I guess, how are we going to ensure that the infrastructure is in place for that? And do we have a sense of just how much that's actually going to cost?
Well, what we need to do is make it a priority. And nowadays, we have to acknowledge that the same way we put emphasis on connecting people through roads and bridges and that physical infrastructure needed to connect people, now one of the most essential ways for people to connect to their work, to their education, to services is through the internet. And acknowledging that that is a vital piece of infrastructure, we need to consider it that and make investments necessary to connect people across the country. We have to get it done. And for me, it's looking at it and regarding this as a priority. And when we prioritize something, we get it done. I've seen governments do that. For New Democrats, it is a priority to fix this, and it's something that we must do.
Prochaine question, Boris Proulx du Devoir.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Bonjour.
Je voulais savoir pourquoi le NPD a présenté un candidat dans la circonscription de Toronto Centre, la circonscription de la chef du Parti vert, Anami Paul, alors que ça risque de diviser le vote progressiste peut-être à la faveur des libéraux.
On a déjà dit à plusieurs reprises qu'on ne fait pas un accord devant les portes fermées. Dans ce cas, on donne le choix aux gens, et les gens, nous avons dit que c'est leur choix de décider qu'ils vont appuyer, et c'est exactement ce qu'on doit faire. Donc, on a un candidat et on appuie notre candidat. C'est une bonne option pour les gens. On croit fermement, profondément que les néo-démocrates sont les seuls partis dans la pandémie qui s'est battu pour les gens et qui ont livré les victoires pour aider les familles. Et dans la relance, on est aussi le seul parti qui peut faire face à les inégalités, particulièrement qui vont s'assurer que les ultra-riches payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens.
Merci. En suivi, c'est le jour 10 de la campagne environ. Pouvez-vous me dire, à votre avis, quelle est, en stade de maintenant, la question de l'urne ou le wedge issue de cette élection?
La question, c'est est-ce qu'on peut... la question dans ces choix, c'est le choix entre Justin Trudeau, qui laisse les ultra-riches gagner de grands profits, ou voter pour l'NPD, qui vont s'assurer que les ultra-riches payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens, pour régler la crise du climat, la crise du logement, pour aider les gens.
Next question, we have Tonda McCharles from the Toronto Star.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Had to
No problem.
unmute. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Singh, I'd like to ask you about your previous position. Do you stand by your party's previous position that you would never prop up a conservative minority? And does that mean you'd try to defeat them at the earliest chance?
Our position is, in this election, I'm running to form government. I'm running to be the Prime Minister because I've seen in the minority that New Democrats made life better for people. If we were not there, if we were not present in Ottawa, if we didn't have 24 New Democrats, people would have been far worse off in this pandemic. And that's motivated me more than ever to be the next Prime Minister so that we can actually help people out.
So that's not an answer to my question. Just then, if you wish to, you could in the follow-up, but let me turn to what price your support would be for in a Liberal minority situation. Would you be, as the NDP, looking for ministers in a formal coalition or guaranteed action on certain policies, or both, or none of the above?
Well, in a new Democrat government, as Prime Minister, whether it's a majority or a minority, we'll look at that when it happens and make decisions that are in the best interest of Canadians. But I can tell you that our goal in this election is to form government, and we're not going to cede that at any point. We are looking to form government because we know that people are better off with us, and we've seen it. I believe this in my heart because I've seen what the Liberals were going to do in this election, in this pandemic. They were going to do the minimum. 10% wage subsidy, which would not have saved jobs. They didn't want to bring in CERB, and then when they did bring it in, they wanted it to be 1,000. We forced them to double it to 2,000. We saved lives in this pandemic. We helped people out with a paid sick leave at the federal level, and we helped out students. If we were not there, people would have been worse off. It's given me more motivation than ever to elect more New Democrats, because when you have more New Democrats, you've got someone on your side who's going to fight for you.
Next question, we have Mary Brooke from Island Social Trends.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Hi. So you're talking about affordability in general and today cell phones in particular. And I want to jump off onto something that hasn't been mentioned in the campaign yet, and that's the gig economy, which developed partly because of unaffordability, but also because there's been no fit for a lot of people in the economy, those jobs that do have benefits and so on. And mostly young adults in their 20s right now have made the gig economy their lifestyle. So do you see, and it's a great lifestyle. I mean, there's a lot of people who really get into it and enjoy it, but it still stems from a system of economics that isn't working. And so do you see a metamorphosis of some kind of more people being able to have a supportable, affordable lifestyle after you would become Prime Minister?
Thank you for the question. I want to say that I've spoken to a lot of people that work in the gig economy, and it is really tough. They would rather a good paying job with benefits, and a lot of folks are struggling, and I don't want to accept that as a reality. I don't want to accept that that's the way work has to be. And what I want to also do is something that I really deeply believe in, is that no one should have to worry about whether they have the right job or the right benefit to get the care that they need. So one of the things we can do to immediately help out workers that don't have benefits, workers that are living in this precarious work style, is to make sure they don't have to worry about their benefits by making sure they're included in our healthcare system. We want to make sure that medication coverage is not a luxury. It's not something that you have to win a lottery to have the right job, to have the coverage. We want everyone in our country to be able to afford the medication they need. On top of that, we know that dental care is one of the biggest divides. If you've got money, you get your teeth looked after. If you don't have money, you don't. Our dental health is clearly linked to our overall health, and it shouldn't be a luxury as well. And so I want to make sure dental care is included in our healthcare system. I want to put in place the protections so that all workers can live their best lives and they don't have to worry about the availability of the right benefits or the right job. I also want to make sure that we fight for better wages and good jobs that people can earn a good living.
And here on the island, on Vancouver Island today, there's going to be an island orange wave happening with 5 of the NDP incumbent candidates. And so curious as to your thoughts on what it is that BC and the island and specifically allows for this, fosters this stronghold and makes possible the philosophies that have really fed the NDP across the country.
I think there's a deep belief across Canada, but I certainly feel it every time I'm on the island, that people want to take care of one another. People want to take care of their neighbor. And that's really at the heart of what New Democrats are about. We believe if we take care of each other, we're all better off. It's something that speaks to what my mom taught me when I was a kid, that we're all one and that we're all connected. The more we look after each other, the better it is for all of us. And that's really the guiding principle. There's also a strong commitment to workers, and we see that on the island, and an understanding that we've got to take care of our planet. Really, that speaks to who we are as a party and who we are as a movement. And I'm proud to say that there's a lot of support in BC, but we see that support here in Windsor as well. Windsor's been a rock bed for New Democrat support because people in Windsor understand that workers have to be put first. They understand the plight of workers, and they've seen the power of workers when they come together in unions to be able to fight for better rights, better conditions of work. And that's why I'm really excited to be here today in Windsor with these incredible candidates that represent a legacy of New Democrats fighting for people, fighting for you and your families.
That concludes our press conference. Thank you. Merci.
Thanks so much. Merci.